to Adobe Max. EditFest is coming up. I don't really know the details of it because my September is so jacked that I didn't even want to tempt myself.
EditFest is this weekend.
Okay.
And if I wasn't traveling, I would be begging my wife to let me out of the house to go to EditFest. So for those of you who don't know, and those of you who are based in the Southern California area, LA, Orange County, Los Angeles, and you don't know what EditFest is, I highly recommend looking into it. I think there is actually an online component to EditFest as well. I normally go to EditFest every year. It's put on by the American Cinema Editors Guild, and it's usually like a one-day event. I think they're doing like a two-day event this year. I think it's one day in person and one day online. But yeah, it's up at the Disney lot, and so you get to go to the Disney lot and kind of hang out there and see a bunch of cool stuff. But more importantly, they have a full day of panels with industry working editors who who talk about the craft of editing, and it's a really, really great day to kind of hang out with folks that are in the industry, meet people, make connections, and learn a lot. So yeah, like I said, I'm sure you can still go. You can still get passes to go to the in-person one. I know you can sign up for the online one. But yeah, I think Eddie Hamilton, I think it's Eddie Hamilton, I could be getting his name wrong, but I think he's the gentleman who cut Top Gun Maverick, will be one of the panels. They'll be talking to him about his career and his work on that movie. So that's just one of the things that's happening. So,
and the thing I always liked about it was like when I've only been once at it. I don't have the history with it that Eric does. And also I'm not an editor, so I'm kind of on the outside of that to a certain degree, but all the panelists and all the, everyone, like, at least in years past, are really accessible. So, I had, when I went, I had multiple glasses of wine with the editor of E.T. I had a great conversation, and I'm still in touch with the editor of Moonlight. So it was just a really fantastic time. People where you're getting to talk to you're beginning to be around a bunch of people that do the same thing you do, or at least similar. And then B, you're actually getting to shop with those people, but also with people who are performing like at the top of their, the top of the field. And you're not going to get that on your average Saturday. So it's muy bueno.
Yeah. Most Saturdays don't involve, Oscar-winning editors hanging out at the Disney lot.
I don't know what you guys do with your time, but
no, and the last thing I'll say about it is DJ's absolutely right. I was amazed a few years ago, pre-pandemic, when I was at EditFest, and one of the editors was talking, and somebody asked that question, how does somebody get, how do they break in to the industry? And he was real honest. He goes, come up and talk to me afterwards. He goes, let's chat. And the guy was super open to, the line of communication. And I've, like DJ said, I've gone up to plenty of working editors and talked to them and made connections. And it's a lot of them I still keep in touch with. For those of you longtime members, probably remember when we had Alan Bell here present, who was the editor for the Hunger Games, and he's cut a lot of 500 Days of Summer and a lot of other great films. I'm almost positive I met him at EditFest and hit him up about doing this. I know Rob Ash, who was the editor on Conan I think we had him present last year, met him at my very first EditFest and kept in touch. And so, yeah, it's a great place to connect with Hollywood editors and get to pick their brains and plant those seeds, if that's the direction that you want to head in. So can't say enough.
Just looked online, and EditFest is both in person and virtual on Saturday and virtual only on Sunday.
There you go.
And the in-person event, I mean, it's not even as a person that's not an editor per se. So if you kind of edit, if you edit sort of, like, the theater that we held it in was the same theater where Walt Disney did the sound checks on Snow White. Like, it's just like, you're in this amazing place, you're with amazing people. Do it if you can.
Yeah. I could go on all day about why people should go to EditFest, especially if you want to be an editor. But we must start the meeting. So let's get started here. Okay, so tonight we're going to have two parts to this meeting. So we're going to talk about stabilization. This was something that I had on my list for meeting topics that we will do in October, as we do every year, when we pick your guys' brains to see what you want to hear. And stabilization has been on that list for a couple of years. And so CJ and I decided to put together a quick presentation kind of talking about Warp Stabilizer, which is included in Premiere. There's a little bit of difference between what's in Premiere and what's in After Effects. So I'll be talking about how Warp Stabilizer works in Premiere. DJ is going to talk about the differences that are inside After Effects. And I'm going to talk about another stabilizer plugin that you have options to, or you can use, and then an extension that can help you with stabilization, doing a bunch of clips at the same time. And then DJ will kind of talk more about Mocha and how you can use that inside After Effects. So there was one thing I'm going to say kind of at the top of this is there was a conversation in the Facebook group about color green screen plugins for comping and doing keying the other day. And we've covered that in past meetings, and something that I said about that, I'm going to say about stabilization tools as well. It is always good to have more than one tool in your arsenal or in your toolbox, however you want to phrase it, to solve a problem. You know, with green screens and compositing, you know, I've got 3 tools at my disposal, and one of them will always do the trick. You know, Ultra inside Premiere is my first line of defense. Primat in Premiere is my second line of defense, and then Keylight or Primat in After Effects is my third. And so, you know, it's good to have those because you're gonna get stuff handed to you that, you know, the one tool isn't going to do that good a job, but this other tool might. And so, you know, Warp Stabilizer is a really powerful tool. It works. I mean, I've found that just dropping it on a clip 90% of the time, it gets you exactly what you need. Every once in a while, it's not quite there. And hopefully some of the stuff we'll show you tonight will help you kind of dial that in. But if it doesn't get you there, you know, these other tools, you know, they might be able to help you do that if you're doing a lot of stabilization. So keep that in the back of your mind if stabilization is something that you use a lot. The other thing that I kind of want to say at the beginning as well is if you are somebody who goes out and says, screw tripods, I'm going to shoot this whole thing handheld and all of your footage is all over the place, okay? I don't care what kind of stabilization tool you have, it's not going to work, and it's not going to fix your shot to be perfectly steady. If you want something that looks like it was shot on a tripod, bloody well shoot it on a tripod. These tools can help you when you've got a little bit of shake, you need to, you know, there's a little bit of movement, or there's, you know, there's something going on, but it's not going to, you know, fix just massive moves and things like that. It's just, that's not what it's designed to do. And there's not much that can fix that other than reshooting. So keep that in the back of your head. I've had people come up to me with shots that are just, you know, you could tell they were just kind of all over the place. And they're like, yeah, Warp Stabilizer isn't working. This plugin's overrated. It's like, well, no, you need to calm down a little bit while you're shooting and try to hold that camera as steady as you can. So, you know, that's step number 1. So anyway, say that to sort of keep that in the back of your head while you're out filming. And if you're just an editor and you're being handed stuff that looks like, a 5-year-old, you know, is manning the camera and just aiming it at anything that moves, you know, you got to tell the person with the that shot it that, you know, there's not much you can do. So anyway, let's get started here. So let me share my screen. Let's see, let's go here to Premiere, share. All right, I'm going to close this up. There we go. Okay, so we've got, I'm just going to start off with the basics with Warp Stabilizer. So let's talk about Warp Stabilizer for a little bit before we kind of dive into it. Because I'm sure that most of you have some experience using Warp Stabilizer, but let's talk a little bit about how it sort of works. So the first thing that I kind of want to talk about is Warp Stabilizer analyzes the whole shot as it's laid out on the timeline. So if you have so my advice to you in that regard is edit first, stabilize at the back end. Reason being is if you just lay out your rough cut and you start stabilizing footage, and then you go back and trim, all of the data that Premiere collects to stabilize, let's say you've got a 10-second shot in your rough cut, and then you stabilize that 10-second shot. Premiere saves all that stabilization data for all 10 seconds of it. And when you go in later in the editing process and trim it to 5 seconds, all the data for the extra 5 seconds is still there, and it's still in the project. And the way the Premiere Pro project file works is it takes all that data and it collects it all and stores it, obviously, so it has access to it to stabilize the shot. But it doesn't always let it go. And so you can, if you have a project where you have a lot of clips that are requiring stabilization, your project file, the Premiere Pro project file itself will grow to be huge because it's got all that data in it. So that's something to keep in mind. Edit first, stabilize at the end. That way you keep your project file size down and it doesn't become super, super bloated.
But if you want to do a test stabilization, you'd recommend doing it as a separate little project just to see whether footage is even salvageable?
I mean, if you're doing a one-off test, I would say go ahead and do it. But if you have a project, you know, as you're in the process of editing, you're laying out your clips, you know, save the stabilization till the end. Just sort of keep it in the back of your head. We're going to stabilize these shots at the end. You know, again, if you know that the shot isn't really going to change in length, you know, and it's like, okay, this is an effect shot that, you know, I'm going to give DJ and I know it's going to be this and I need to stabilize it now. Well, then, you know, go ahead and do that. But in your normal course of editing, if you've got a lot of shots, I'd say I would recommend wait until the very end to stabilize them.
Well, I was just thinking, if you've got a whole lot of shots which may need stabilization and you wait until the end to find out you really can't do it, you put a lot of work into editing.
Well, you know, so yeah, I mean, if that's your case where, you know, you've got a shot that you're sort of on the bubble about, like, well, okay, well, if I can't stabilize this shot, I'm not going to use it. Well, then stabilize the shot, I would say, you know, but in general, if you've got shots like some of the shots that I'm going to show you as part of the demo where, you know, there's just a little bit of shake and you know that you're going to be able to dial in stabilization and it's not going to be an issue, you know, then I would say with those kind of situations, wait until the end. You know, but yeah, if it's a mission critical shot, we're like, we got to know if we can do this up front before we can continue, or we got to go do something else. Yeah, of course, in that case, then I would say stabilize. So it's more of a recommendation just to keep your project file size, you know, down. So the other thing I will add too is that Premiere has updated the way that Warp Stabilizer works. And so it can take advantage of multi-core processors. So, you know, you can be, you know, trying to analyze multiple clips at the same time. And you know, you don't want to go too overboard with that. And like I said, I'm going to show you a tool to sort of help with that at the end of my presentation. But that is something that, so the more RAM you have, the more CPU horsepower you have, you know, Premiere will take advantage of that. And so you can kind of be laying out a few clips and trying to analyze them all at the same time if you need to. And if you work with proxy files, just understand that Premiere isn't going to stabilize your proxy file. It will stabilize the original clip. Proxy files, you know, are lower quality. And so, you know, you're not going to get as good a detailed analysis of the clip anyway because of that. So it always will look back at sort of the original clip and stabilize that. I'm trying to think if I have anything else. I want to say up front too, there's a gentleman who sent me in the batch processing plugin that I'm going to show you at the end. His name is Joshua. He's from Germany. He sent me a lot of really great information about Warp Stabilizer, things that I wasn't aware of. And so I want to thank him right now for sending me that information and hooking me up with the extension, and also giving us a copy of the extension to raffle off at the end of the meeting. So stay to the end of the meeting and you might walk away with a cool little tool for Premiere. But anyway, so let me see if I got everything else here that I wanted to talk about, looking over my notes. So I think we are ready to go. All right, so I've got this shot right here. You can see it's just a little bit of shake here, just downtown. It's not too crazy. But, you know, if you wanted to smooth that shot out, of course, we would just go to good old Warp Stabilizer. Warp Stabilizer. I gotta have the clip selected, sorry. There we go. Okay, so first thing we'll talk about is you can see you drop Warp Stabilizer on the clip and it analyzes it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the basics of it because, again, I'm assuming you all sort of know about Warp Stabilizer and have used it and are kind of familiar with it. So basically, it analyzes, it stabilizes, and then you can see. Let's look how it did here. So it looks pretty good. That looks really good. Now you'll notice right there. Did you see that? A little bit of wobble there. It's right there. So we'll come back to that. So sometimes when you shoot with some cameras like CMOS sensor cameras, you're going to have some rolling shutter issues, or you may just get, just based on the stabilization, you may get some little weird wobble like that. It's Premiere trying to, compensate and stabilize footage that's moving all around. You can see if I turn it off, that's not there normally, but there is a little bit of a camera move. You can kind of see how the camera is dipping down kind of at that point. It's moving. So when I turn it back on, you can kind of see it adds this little weird, kind of weird warping to everything. So anyway, and you can tell too that, it's punched in a little bit, it's cropped. If you come down inside here, you can see the auto scale, it's cropped it to about 108.6%. That's how much it's pushed in. So let's kind of go into some of these tools. You've got smooth motion or no motion. So if we choose between these two, smooth motion is going to give us kind of that little still moving camera feel to it, like it's got a little bit of life in it. If we go to no motion, it's going to restabilize, and you can watch here, it's going to make it much more locked off. You can see there's a little bit of weird wobble there, but now you can tell it's not moving at all, but there is a lot of weird wobble going on because it's having to compensate. You've got this guy walking in front, and that's going to kind of throw things off. You can see it right there, that weird kind of thing. So, but if we didn't have that, you can see that it would, kind of give you a no motion, or a smooth motion is probably the best way to go. It kind of gives the camera a little bit of a makes it feel a little bit alive. It still keeps a little bit of movement there. If we come down to smoothness is how much smoothing out do we want to do? 50% is usually, a good place to start. But if you wanted to try to dial it back a little bit, we can dial this back. Let's maybe go to 33%. Let's see how that changes things. All right. So let's see. Let's play it back now. So still looks pretty good. Not too much going on here. We still got that little bit of weird kind of warping thing here at the end. I said we'll come back to that in a second here, but you can see there's a little bit more movement to it. But again, smoothness is just that slider to how much do you want to stabilize and smooth out that shot. That's something to play with. If the first dropping it on doesn't get you what you want, go to smoothness and try playing with that. Add more, add less, dial it in a little bit to see where you go. Method. So the method is going to just you've got all your different things here: position, scale and rotation, position, scale, rotation, perspective, and subspace warp. Subspace warp is where I generally leave things. The others are just going to kind of, it's going to try to, like we do position here. Let's see how that looks. See, position still not quite, it's not punched in all the way, and it still doesn't feel quite right to me. It's still like there's a little bit more movement in it. It's just trying to analyze for position. And then if you do position, scale, rotation, the other thing with this is this footage probably isn't the best for that because it's sort of a static, very flat looking image. So if you had a little bit more depth or movement, these things would probably come a little bit more into play. But for this clip, subspace warp is probably the best thing to do. And I found through using this, subspace warp is usually what I want to do. You can click preserve scale, and it'll try to preserve the scale of the original clip as much as it can. But the trade-off is that you're going to see more movement. And so, I always leave preserve scale off and just sort of let it do its thing. Now you've got framing here. Now this is something to kind of look at. You've got stabilize only. And if you click on stabilize only, you can see here, it's stabilizing the shot, but you can see the black bars that are around. Let me make it a little bit bigger here. You see the black bars around it. So it's stabilizing the center of the shot, but it's not, but you're seeing those black bars. It's kind of because it's, moving the shot around to sort of to keep it stabilized. If you go stabilize and crop, now you can see it's stabilized it, it's sort of cropped the image, but we have the black bars sort of around it. And that actually doesn't look too bad. Stabilize, crop, auto scale. That's generally what I use because it's going to auto scale it to sort of fit, to fill the frame. And it's going to do all the stabilizing, cropping, everything that you need. The one that I tend to stay away from, and I don't know a really good application for this, but I know it's here, so some people must use it, is the synthesize edges. And what this will do is it will sort of create edges based on the pixels that are here. I'm not going to try to do this now because it is a render hog. You can see it's restabilizing using that. It takes a while because it has to sort of recreate these frames on the sides where those black bars would normally be. And it really can create some interesting, weird stuff. And so like I said, I can't even play it right now. It really needs to render out. So I have never really gotten good results using that. If you have, I would love to know about it or what your application for using that is, because for me, it's never been an option. It's never been something that I wanted to use.
I was watching an online lesson about stabilization the other day, and the guy said the same exact thing.
Yeah, I'm sure it has some use. I'm sure somebody's getting some benefit from it. All right, so let's come down a little bit further here. So you've got this advanced tab. So in the advanced tab, you can see here, you've got detailed analysis and fast analysis. Now, fast analysis is what's checked by default. It generally does a really good job. So, I mean, you can tell this was a fast analysis, and, you know, for the most part, it's pretty good. It looks stable enough for most things. If you had a shot that was a little bit more complex, it wasn't giving you exactly what you wanted, and you can tell we still have that weird sort of warping going on here. So I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to turn on the detailed analysis. Now you can see up here, it tells you your countdown, and it tells you where you're at in the process of analyzing it. So we've got about 49 seconds left in the analyzing. It takes longer to analyze it using the detailed analysis, but the results that you get from that are far greater and more precise. And so, yeah, if fast analysis isn't giving you quite what you want, go back, run the detailed, and let it reanalyze, and you can sometimes see a much improved stabilized shot. So I'm going to let it go here. It's almost done. We got about 20 seconds left. And while we're waiting for it to finish, you can see right here, rolling shutter ripple. If you have a CMOS camera, which most of us do these days, you have no doubt seen rolling shutter. It's when you pan the camera left or right and you get this kind of like weird jello effect. It can drive people nuts if you pan too fast. So you can change, if you've got a CMOS sensor camera like I shot this with, and you've got some jello kind of going on, enhanced reduction can sometimes help with that, and eliminate that. So let's see how we did. So because I was getting a little bit of that weird jello thing. So I did the detailed analysis, rolling shutter ripple. Let's see. And I changed it to enhance. Let's see how it looks now. So far I'm liking this a lot better. And so that's looking pretty good right there. It doesn't look too bad, that ripple thing. So I'm getting a little bit of weird camera move right there. So I might want to work on this a little bit more, but yeah, that's stabilizing wise. That's looking a lot better to me.
If you do multiple analysis, does that build up that residue of material that you're commenting on earlier about stabilizing first, then edit?
I'm not quite sure I understand your question. If
you say, all right, I'll try the fast analysis. No, I think I'll try the detailed. Does the fast analysis data still sit around there?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So no, I believe it would need to reanalyze. So it'll wipe out that data, and you can see it's now reanalyzing again. So it'll get rid of it and then rebuild it. So yeah, Premiere is, to the best of my knowledge, Premiere doesn't hang on to that data once you wipe it clean. So once you change something, if you were to change this shot and you had to reanalyze, or you did something to it, it will get rid of the data and create new data to replace that. Does that make sense? But if you don't reanalyze, if you just sort of re-edit the shot, if you shrink it down, then yes, it sort of keeps that data from those unused frames. So, okay, so where were we here? Okay, so crop. So let's talk about this. Crop less smooth. This is sort of what you want to, if you want to adjust the amount of crop versus smooth. So it's like, I want a smoother shot and I don't care about my crop, or I want it to crop more and I'll sort of trade off on the smoothness of it. This is sort of your slider to adjust that. But let's see, are we still on detailed? Oh yeah, I got both of them checked. So let's just go back to fast analysis here. So anyway, so that's what that slider does. So that's warp stabilizer sort of in a nutshell with the two different analysis, the fast analysis and the detailed analysis. One thing I kind of wanted to show is this shot right here. For those of you who
I'll get headphones.
welcome to the meeting, Wayne.
Hey,
It's good to see you.
I thought I turned audio off.
For those of you who have been to San Diego Filmmakers in the past, you might remember I did a presentation there years and years and years ago, and this was a clip that I showed. But I always like to show it because I think it really kind of shows how good Warp Stabilizer is and how good it can really be just with its default settings. So this is a shot from a helicopter. I'm going to play it. Shot of a helicopter shooting a ship going out to sea. You can see because it was in a helicopter, the cameraman was literally hanging out the side of the helicopter. There's a lot of bounce in that shot. So I'm going to just drop on Warp Stabilizer on there and kind of just show you, just kind of like how good this thing is just on its own. So it's going to analyze. I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to let it do its thing here. And just show you how it is. I think I deleted Warp Stabilizer. I had already stabilized it, so I wouldn't have to wait. But yeah, so it'll just take another 15 seconds here. But yeah, it's a really great tool to have built in. I always say it's my first line of defense, even though I've got another tool to back it up. It's a great first line of defense, and most of the time the default settings work really well. So this is after warp stabilizing, and you can see that's pretty amazing how well it looks. I mean, just add some really dramatic movie music behind it, and you've got your clip here. I mean, that's pretty awesome. It got rid of, I mean, if you just look at the before, and that's just using the basic settings. So that's that. So one other thing I wanted to show is, let me go back to my bin here, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to show you another clip here. So I've got this clip here, and this is downtown. Scardelli's really familiar with it. I'm going to show you a different stabilizer tool. Now, this stabilizer tool is from NewBlueFX, and it's just called Stabilizer. And I'll drop it on there. Now, this shot's actually not too bad to begin with, so I don't know if it's the best example to use, but it's got a little bit of shake, and we want to try to get it totally smooth here. Did I not highlight the clip here? I'm forgetting to do that tonight. So we'll click on Stabilizer. And so the way the stabilizer works is, you can see it says analysis required. So what you do is you click on setup inside your effects controls for stabilizer, and it's going to give you this little preview window, and you have some presets here. So you have default stabilization, ignore fast moving object, which would probably be the fire truck that we're seeing there in the shot, ignore object in center, static camera, fast moving or track fast moving object. You've got different presets that you can try. We're just going to use default stabilization for this one. And then what you do is you see this little preview window down here. I'm going to click analyze. Now you've got slow versus fast. This is the motion emphasis. What you want to emphasize more on, the slow things in the frame or the fast things in the frame, the center or the edge. And you can dial these little things in as you need to. So because I use that preset, which is just the default, it sort of uses the default settings, and then you've got your strength here. So I'm going to click analyze, and you can see that it's analyzing the shot, and the white dots are the points that matter. The orange dots that you see through here are shots that don't matter. And so now it's analyzed the shot, and I can preview it in this little window right here. And I say, that looks pretty good. That's good. If there were things that I wanted to change, I can come in and change them here in the stabilization. So I've got my smoothing here. I could try to smooth it out a little bit more, dial this up a bit. Instead of mirror, I'm going to go black, and it's got this, see how it's feathering the edge? So I'm going to reduce the feather, and I'm going to do fill, and I'm going to up my crop. So my crop is set to 4 right now. So I'm going to up it just a little bit more to get rid of any edges that might show. Preview it again, and that looks pretty stinking good. So I'm going to click OK, and then it will add all that stuff to the shot. Now you can see, unlike Warp Stabilizer, which is GPU accelerated, Stabilizer from NewBlue is not GPU accelerated. So it does need to render. However, it's playing pretty good right here on my system, but you can see, well, except when the fire truck comes in, but you can see it actually looks pretty good. If I turn off the stabilizer just for comparison, you can see just a lot of little shake there. And going back with it on, let me render it out just so you can kind of see. I don't think it'll take too long to render. All right, almost done here, and boom. So then let's take a look. So yeah, that looks pretty good. So again, you know, would Warp Stabilizer work on this clip? Sure, it might, but maybe you don't get the results that you want. Having Stabilizer from NewBlue to go in there and analyze it is another thing you can try. So it's a really handy tool. I like the little preview window for it to kind of see what you're getting before you commit to it, and you can still dial things in. Whereas with Warp Stabilizer, you sort of do all your setting, you hit analyze, it stabilizes, and then you look at it and go, okay, it's not quite right. So you have to readjust, you know, and then it restabilizes. You know, this sort of lets you see everything, you know, kind of as you before you commit to it. So I think that's kind of a cool, interesting thing here. So I wanted to show a couple shots here of things that are a little bit more dramatic here. So I've got this shot of me walking in a hallway. If Pat Espinoza is on this meeting still, he will recognize this because he shot it. And it is no reflection on his skills that it's a little wobbly, but let me show you. This is what it looks like without Warp Stabilizer. You can see there's a lot of shake. And then with Warp Stabilizer, you can kind of play back and you kind of got a feel for it. So there's still a little bit of shake, so you could probably still need to dial it in a bit, and we're still getting some of the warping. So probably want to spend some time, you know, playing with it to get it a little bit better. But this is definitely one of those cases, like I talked about at the beginning, where, you know, it was shot handheld over uneven ground, walking, trying to handhold a camera. You know, you're not going to get really steady footage to begin with. And so when you come into your stabilization, you kind of have to sort of realize that you're not going to get it like you were on a dolly or like on a steady cam. So you have to sort of be willing to accept, to a certain degree, you're going to have a little bit of movement still in there. You're not going to be able to get it completely locked off static. You know, I could try the other stabilizer on it. In fact, let's see how that works real quick, just to sort of see what it produces. I'm going to try the locked off camera setting on it. So let's come into the setup. Now, if you remember, there's these presets in here, and one of them is static camera. And so I'm going to do that, and you can see it's sort of kind of created its own preset settings here. And I'm going to click analyze. And again, the white dots are the things that it's using to sort of track. The orange dots are not. They're just sort of things that, I guess, to ignore. And let's see how it does. But it's really putting this thing to work here. And you can see the more complex the shot, and this is actually a 4K shot, you know, as opposed to the other ones which were HD. So there's a lot more for it to process and for it to look at, you know, because of the higher resolution. But you can see it's almost done here, and we'll see how it looks. Okay, come on.
Do any of these allow you to mask? Like if you masked out the person and just track the walls, it would probably smooth that pretty nicely.
It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, you know, if you're going to get to the point where you're masking stuff out, I think you might want to stick around to see what DJ does with Mocha, because it works a little bit differently. And you know, if things are that shaky, you know, I mean, I suppose you could try to mask out the person and then just stabilize on the walls, but you know, I don't know that if you're getting to that advanced of a you know, a track, then I think what happens, what Mocha does might be more up your alley than one of these tools. So let's look at it here. So that's actually, oh, so yeah, we're getting a lot of weird kind of bending here. So let me do black. You can see now how it's having to shift the frame around here. So I'm going to remove my feather. I'm going to up my crop and see how that looks. So what I like about this is it's really keeping me center. So I'm going to click OK. And I might want to render this one out. It might take a little while just because it's a 4K shot. Let's see if we can, how long it's going to take to render here. Okay, well, I think you never want to see that. I'm not quite sure why that's giving me that. Of course, doesn't do it in rehearsal. It waits to do it when you're doing the demo. But anyway, it should normally work. I'm not sure why it's giving me that error now, but it looked like it was pretty good in the little tracking window. If I come back to the setup window, I wonder if it'll play for me there. It looked like it was. Yeah, so I mean, looking at it here, that looks pretty good. You know, it's focusing on me. So again, this is a case where, yeah, this one actually looks pretty good. So I would click OK, and normally it would render out and then we'd be fine. But for whatever reason, Premiere is giving me issues. So we're going to move on. I always hate it when it does this. Okay, so the last, well, almost last thing, I wanted to show this shot too, because this was an example of a shot where I shot this years ago on my old EX3. It was over uneven floor. I put the camera on a black little like cart, and you can see it was my really poor man's Steadicam shot, and it sucks. But any one of these tools, you know, should work. We drop warp on there. Again, same sort of thing. You know, it's going to analyze it and stabilize it out. I gotta remember to, this is not my night. Warp stabilizer. So this should go fairly quick here. The fast analysis, I think, works. But I think actually on this one, the detailed analysis was the better way to go. So let's look at it real quick and see. So now it's going to stabilize. And so, oh, that's not too bad. But if you notice, look over here. So again, we're dealing with a CMOS sensor, and see how it kind of warps a little bit. So again, those are the kind of things you want to look for, because they're a bit of a tell that you've done something to the shot. It kind of just gives a, like, the viewer might not know exactly what's wrong with it, but they see that and it might catch their eye and think, well, something's weird about that shot. So this is definitely where you'd want to come down, and you would probably want to enhance reduction for the CMOS sensor just to see if that can get rid of it. And let's see if that makes a difference here. That actually looks better to me. I don't know how it looks to you guys, but to me, it looks better. I might still want to do the detailed analysis just to get a better analysis, because it looks like it might be a little bit right there. So the detailed might give me a better result. But again, those are the kind of things you want to look for, is, you know, when you're doing something where there's a lot of shaky movement, you want to try to find, you know, look at it very carefully to sort of see where the things are that catch your eye that don't look quite right, where warp stabilizer or whatever stabilizer is trying to compensate for the shakiness, and it might bend and distort the image, you know. And again, that might be a case too where the more detailed analysis, you know, would come into play. And I don't know how long that's going to take, but if it's going to take too long, I want to kind of keep moving here. Actually, I'll let it do its thing, and then I'll move on to the last thing, and then we'll come back to it. Well, it's only 40 seconds. Does anybody have any questions before I move on to the last thing? No? Come on, people, I got 30 seconds to kill. Somebody's got to have some sort of question. Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to let it do its thing here for another 20 seconds. And then we'll look at it and see if that gives me any big improvement. And then we'll move on to the batch processing plugin, which is super, super cool. Okay, 4, 3, 2, 1, and here we go. So it's now going to stabilize, and let's see if this makes a difference. All right. Right away, I think it does make a difference. I'm not seeing as much of that weird wobble in there. Yeah, I think that's better. There's still got a little bit in there. Maybe I need to play with it a little bit more. I probably want to adjust my smoothness, baby, and adjust that down. Let's try to go to like maybe 25%. I want to see if that changes anything here. And I would probably trim this shot too. That's a little too rocky. Just for giggles, let's jack this thing up. Let's go like 80%. It's taken a while to stabilize. So, but again, changing the smoothing is really going to change that level of stabilization. So it's going to take a little bit of time here. But, oh, here we go. All right, let's see how it looks. Doesn't look too bad. Yeah, that might work. I might trim that shot too, so it's only part of the whole take. That might be too long of a take, but yeah, that looks pretty good. Again, compared to what we had. Yes, that's much improved. So anyway, so there you go. So warp stabilizer and stabilizer from NewBlueFX, two options that you have in the Premiere arsenal. Now, the last thing I want to show you is, let's go back to this clip here. So we talked about not stabilizing all your clips at the beginning, waiting until the end to do it. So what instead, if normally you would have to do them all one at a time, or sort of just click analyze and then just walk away. But let me drag a bunch of clips down, and I'm going to shorten this one up. That was long, and I'm going to take this one. Come on down, and then I'm going to let's take this one again. And I think I have one other one I wanted to use. This one, I'm going to shorten it up as well. I'm going to get rid of all the audio. Now, let's say I needed to stabilize these 4 clips, and I didn't want to sit around and wait for it. So I can highlight these clips. I'm going to come up to my extensions, and I'm going to choose batch analysis for warp stabilizer. It's going to open up my panel here. And in this panel, you can see I've got some settings here. Reanalyze all clips in queue. So that way, if there's anything that's already been analyzed and you want to reanalyze it, this will do that. You can choose to use the detail analysis. I'm actually going to turn that off for this one, but you can do that if you want to do that way, which I recommend. It's much better, get much better analysis that way. If warp stabilizer is not present, it's going to add it to the clips. So I haven't added warp stabilizer to any of these clips, so it'll do that now. You can choose to render the timeline when finished, save the project when finished. You can choose how many retry counts, if there's any kind of issue and it can't stabilize it, how many times do you want it to retry, and then max parallel analysis. So this is sort of saying, how many clips do you want to do at a single time? If you've got a beefy computer with a lot of horsepower, a lot of RAM, a lot of CPU cores going on, you could probably bump this up. Let's do 3. I could probably do a little bit more than that with what I've got in my laptop here. But let's just go ahead and do that. So I've got these clips selected down here in my timeline. I'm going to add selected clips. You can see it instantly added them to this queue. All I have to do is click start queue. And then I'm going to lunch. Or I'm going home and going to bed. And so you could add as many clips as you need to. So if you've got a short film that you're doing, or a feature film or whatever, and you've got 100 clips that need to be stabilized, and you don't want to sit around and do it, wait for it, boom, this tool, just select all the clips, put them in this thing, and then leave. It will do it all, analyze them, and then you can come back when they're done. You can see it's already finished 3 of them. It's working on the last one here. You can see the bar here. And then, so it's all done. Got them all. It says down here, all clips have been analyzed. So now I can go through and just sort of watch and say, okay, how do they look? Looking good. Low system resource manufacturer. Okay. I think I'm pushing zoom here. So yeah, everything's looking good so far. But if there was something that I wanted to tweak, there's something that I didn't like, I can still go up inside my warp stabilizer tool here and dial in those settings and sort of get them to where I want to be. But if you've got a bunch of clips that need to be stabilized, that extension is a great tool to use. It is $29.95, so it is not expensive. It really is. $30 for an extension that does something like that, that's just, come on, can't beat that. And some lucky person tonight is going to go home with it. So anyway, so that's the batch analysis. So that's all I got. Those are the best things I found to use in Premiere. If you have another stabilizer plugin that you use, I would love to know about it. Between those two, the stabilizer from NewBlue and warp stabilizer inside Premiere, I've always had really good results. I think there's only been a few times where I've actually had to call somebody like DJ or somebody else who knows Mocha and try to use Mocha to get something even better. but most of the time Warp Stabilizer does it really, really well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Is there any questions before we move over to After Effects and what DJ's got cooking?
Do you get that wobble with a full frame camera, like an A7, or is it just this smaller sensors?
Are you talking about the Jello?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see it as much. It used to be really bad with the cameras. It's gotten better with most cameras. They've been able to sort of eliminate it a lot with the technology. But even with my FX9, if I pan too fast and you've got a pole, yeah, there is still a little bit of wobble. And the faster you pan, you can really kind of see, that wobble happen. I remember years ago, maybe I shouldn't tell this story. Who cares? I remember years ago, I was thinking about buying, before I bought my EX3, that gives you the time frame. I was looking at buying a Panasonic camera. I want to say it was the HX300 maybe. And I went to Video Gear and I had heard that it had issues with, rolling shutter is what that's called. And so I went to Video Gear because they had one to test out, and I shot a bunch of C-stands. And I panned really fast, and those C-stands, I still got the footage somewhere. I mean, it was just like wavy, wavy, wavy as I went back and forth really fast. And I posted a clip online about it in some Panasonic group because there was a lot of discussion about how bad it was on that camera. And so I posted this clip and I kind of said, this was just my, basic test that I did somewhere. And the product manager for the camera from Panasonic, like, totally flamed me on that board, saying that that was a completely unrealistic test, that nobody would ever shoot that way, and that, whatever. And I basically responded back, is like, look, people ask for whip pans all the time. I can't tell them, I'm sorry, I have the wrong camera for a whip pan. Make everything look like Jello. I said, you guys need to work this technology out. So that didn't placate her, and I don't think she liked me after that. But anyway, that's a different story. So anyway, so that is, if there's no other questions, I will turn it over.
Batch thing is basically just a scheduler with the Warp Stabilizer.
So yes, batch is basically it does exactly, it's sort of a Adobe Media Encoder for Warp Stabilizer. So you would, if you've got a clip or if you've got a project where you've got a number of clips that need to be stabilized, you can just throw them all to that and it will handle that all while you do other things.
Right, but it's using Warp Stabilizer to do the work. It's just a scheduler.
Yes, it is. It's doing, it'll assign Warp Stabilizer to all the clips if it's not already there, and stabilize them all. So very handy. And there's nothing else. DJ, you want to pick it up from there?
Sure. Like all good Broadway plays, after the intermission is always a little bit shorter. So we're on the downhill on this. Basically there's three ways that with After Effects, I'm sure I could find 15 different things that people have written, but there's going to be three ways that you do it. And I felt like anything beyond that would be a little excessive, because yeah, just if your footage is that rough, either reshoot, or if you can't reshoot, take it to Fusion, take it to something else, and you're gonna have to start building like your own custom piece, because there's a whole bunch of ways this can go wrong. There's a whole bunch of stuff that could need stabilizing. So yeah, let's go ahead and hop in. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. All right, so I went ahead. This is actually, I'll go ahead and take that all the way off. This was me playing around with it. So this is a shot that one of the shots that Eric gave me because I don't have footage, because yeah.
I know that dude.
Yeah, he's a good dude. He's a good dude. So yeah, so the first thing I was going to cover was like Warp Stabilizer. But Eric did that, so we're done. No. So there are a couple differences in After Effects, and that's the reason this is going to be a shorter side of things, because like it's a lot the same, and actually even more than I realized. It used to be much different. I think they're syncing them up. So we analyze in the background, we're doing our thing. All the first part is all pretty much the same. All of this stuff, all the same. We might be hanging out here for a few minutes, so I might switch over to one of the other ones, because it's got 30 seconds. But yeah, so all of this is pretty much the same. Where you start getting into different stuff is once we get the data, you can actually have it unstabilize, you can have it restabilize, and you can actually use it as like a mini tracker. If you need a lot of precise stuff, this is not the tracker you want. But if you're trying to follow something in a general way, it works. It's going to get the job done. So I wanted to show you how you could kind of get things, together with that. And also, there is something that I wish, I don't guess it would make sense in Premiere, because I've never seen anything that uses that kind of user interface in it, but there is something that it should have in Premiere that it has in After Effects. So the first thing is, all right, so we did it, it looks stable, it looks neat, awesome. The first thing, the first one, and this should be in Premiere in my personal opinion, is you can show the track points. And we can start seeing all these track points, what it's using to get this data. So you can blow them up really big if you want to. Why this is important is if you have if you've done a warp stabilized thing and something crosses in front of it. If there's a leaf up here, from a tree that's just throwing things off and it's just moving on a different, plane, if it's moving in a different system than the rest, you can actually highlight those, hit delete, done. And it's not tracking those anymore. And it'll redo it. And it, so it's just a way to kind of refine it a little bit if you have kind of weird errant things going on in your frame. Or if there's, let's say that you have that you're stabilizing something and then there's a TV over here that's, showing a subway train moving to the left and right. So it's kind of throwing it off, and you're going to get a little bit more of the that rolling shutter stuff that Eric was talking about. You're going to get that kind of stuff in those shots. So it's just a nice little addition to be able to go in and kind of kill those points off. If you don't need it in this shot, we actually don't need it because it came out quite nice. Cool. So this is where it's different. Like, I think it's exactly the same up to this line. And then we've got that same hide warning banner, but this section between objective and here. So, what we can do is all of these kind of do the same thing, but for different reason. Reverse stabilize is kind of interesting. I selected it's going to do its thing. So now instead of stabilizing, it's reverse stabilizing. So now it does this kind of thing, to where what it's doing is, it's kind of using that transform data instead, which you can take that situation, and then if you do that with, you can take that off, you kind of get the situation to where you could apply pieces and have it track with the scene. Not that super impressive. But what you can do to take that even further is apply motion over original. All right, so what we're going to do is I just went ahead and threw my logo in here because that was the only thing I could think of at that moment. And we go ahead and put it as the target layer. So now let's throw an unmult on, it's got an unmult on it. Just to make it easier, let's throw effects and masks, sorry, so we can see through it. And now we've got a little track here. Now it's not a planar tracker, so it doesn't respect the Z space of the shot, but this is more than enough if you just wanted to have a little thing here that said call box or whatever, if you wanted to have like something here. You combine that then with like a roto brush so that Eric walks in front of it and it cuts out and you're in a good place. If you move the target layer, it does not do anything. But since I changed it to effects and and mats, I can drop a transform effect on here and start playing with it a little bit, but it is going to cut off at certain points. So, I mean, it's not a tracker. It's something that you can use to get down and dirty and kind of make some cool, might be able to use it to do a track if you really don't want to take the time to do a full 3D track. But it's something that's kind of, I've used it before in places and it more than gets the job done. So there's that. The rest of these I don't use too much. The reverse stabilization. I mean, apply motion to target. That just puts it on its own black layer if you wanted to copy the motion from something, but not necessarily be able to see it. So in this case, it's following the call box, but it gives it a little like interesting balance. I've seen people use this to introduce organic animation. It works. That's the way to do it. It's fine. It's not wrong. But yeah, so that's kind of the thing here, is being able to really play with like reversing it, and having the things move around, using it kind of as a tracker, and also just diving into those the track points and just being able to refine what you have there. And that's the warp stabilizer. I have to say, I was really impressed when we started talking about it and diving into it. I was really impressed with how far the Premiere versions come, because they've really introduced a lot of stuff that at least I didn't remember being in there. I did do a side-by-side comparison, and from what I can tell, it's the same engine. They produce the exact same results. So as far as bringing it into warp stabilizer for After Effects versus warp stabilizer for Premiere, if you're in Premiere, hang out in Premiere. No reason to change. All right, so the next one that I had, and this is Mocha, because I know everyone loves talking about Mocha. Mocha's like it's so powerful. It's this entire piece that they give you with After Effects, and a lot of people, if you never open it, I know we've talked about it before, and I think it's one of those things that's great at confusing people, because it breaks down time and space in a weird way, and that's the reason I kind of love it. I will say that like my career was definitely divided into before learning Mocha and after learning Mocha. I use it a little less than I used to these days, but I still use it every month. So this is a shot, not a whole lot going on in here. I will say, in my opinion, I think you get a better better stuff out of Mocha. So you just go in, and it's called Mocha AE. It's a free version of Mocha. It's a whole big program that you can spend like $1,500 on. Nobody, including myself, is doing anything that we need to spend $1,500 on Mocha. I used to have a version that was paid for, and that was cool and all, but really, unless you're doing like stereoscopic video, don't bother. Just don't need it. It does, you can do your planar tracking. So what planar tracking would be was if we wanted to change this to be 120, if we wanted to change this to say void, and then still make it track with the motion. That's what planar tracking is, because it is a plane. It would make sure that it matches in 3D space. But we don't need to do that for this. So for this, all we got to do is just highlight a little area and draw a square around it. Now, let's say that a hand comes in and screws up with what we're trying to do. It would screw up the track because the hand is going to come in from a different angle. It's going to throw the motion off, and it wouldn't be able to accurately decide what it was doing. If that's the case, if you ever need to cut something out of Mocha's stack is its layer stack up here is in order. So if this hand were to come here, we trace the hand, we track it, that would always stay on layer 1. If that's on the top layer, it will ignore that piece for everything else. And then you can track the pieces below it, and it will cut, and it would just ignore whatever is going on in that hand. So that's your good key, is remember your top layer. If you have multiple layers, your top layer, each layer cuts out the rest. So if you have layer 1 and layer 2, layer 1 will not affect the track for layer 2. If you have layer 1, 2, and 3, layer 1 and 2 will not affect the track for 3. Like, they are cut out of that. Those sections are just cut out, and that is ignored. So super helpful. Yeah, so I just drew a square. The splines I found in Mocha, like the more time I try to like define the splines, the less good it is. And so I usually just draw the biggest honking rectangle I can around it. You press play to track it forward. Now, when you're doing a plane track, you always want to get it as you always want to look for the frame where it is as clear as possible, where you get a full perspective on it. It doesn't have to be straight onto the camera, but you can really get like all the angles really well. In a shot where you're just tracking the motion like this, not necessary. I wouldn't worry about it. That's not going to help anybody. You can just go, straight from frame 1, and you're going to be in a good spot. So it takes a few seconds, but it's relatively quick. Not quite real time, maybe a third real time. And if anybody has any Mocha questions while we wait for it, that's cool too. Quiet group tonight. When Eric asked, I was actually trying hard to come up with some sort of question to ask, just because I felt bad for him. Because I know how it is. Yeah, I know. It's rough when there's nothing to do and you're sitting there waiting for something to burn. All right, so it's burned off. Here we go. Okay, so now it's complete. We close out of Mocha. And we hit save. All right, so Mocha is, we now have that. We come into track data, and we just want to hit create track data because it's already in there, and we're using layer 1 to do so. Hit OK. All right. Now here's the thing: if we hit apply export, well, first we're going to want to change it to transform, because remember, corner pin is if you're doing a screen replace. If you're doing phone screen replaces for monitors, that's a corner pin. Mocha and corner pin, that's going to be your life. I worked on a feature film where we did 75 screen replaces because it was all about cell phones, and I lived in Mocha for 2 months, and it was It was enough Mocha for a bit. It was enough Mocha. But with that said, you know, it was basically Mocha and corner pin, and trying to do it any other way is crazy. So Mocha, corner pin, screen replace, that's all you need to know there. But here, since we're talking stabilizations, we're just going to come out to transform and hit apply export. So what that does, if you look, is it creates a bunch of keyframes, so many keyframes. Don't even try to change them. But if you look, what it does is, doesn't look quite right. It's not exactly what we wanted to do. Well, first we wanted to make sure that we change it to layer export to, because it'll apply the keyframes to our layer, but we want to make sure that it's applying them correctly. Then we hit apply export again, but look, what's up with that? Why is it doing that? Oh God, we've got the transform data. Now this is, the reason I show this is because this is actually really useful if you have, if you're working in After Effects and you have a 3D, if you have a 3D camera that you need to add shape to. You can sit there and apply wiggle through expressions, you can keyframe it and all that's weird, but like now this data right here, we can parent stuff to it, and that's gonna be an organic shape that we can use. And I have a few of these that I keep, that I use on stuff anytime I need the camera to shake and look like it's being handheld, or like a motion design shot. And it's just gonna be a nice little piece. You're like, DJ, this is about stabilization and this sucks. I'm gonna want my money back. All right, I totally get it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come up here and hit invert. All right. I'm going to hit apply export again. It's going to do some thoughts. And now we're locked down. And it does this, and it does that same thing that Eric was talking about, where like, yeah, our edges aren't there. So, but you know, you're saying, DJ, this is useless, because if I hit scale, there's all these keyframes, and it's just, I have to keyframe everyone at scale. No, you do not. You come over here, Control Alt Y, it's going to create you a null. You're going to compare that to the null. You're going to blow it up. Boom. And basically you're doing the same thing as warp stabilizer, only you're introducing less warps. There's still a little bit of warps, as you can see, but less warps, in my opinion, at least. The one thing I would say is you almost get this, it's almost eerie how because it's very good at stabilizing, but you still get those warps in. So it's kind of this eerie, like jelly kind of vibe. And I would just be mindful of that, because it's kind of weird. So, all right, the other thing that we got to talk about is, look at that. There's motion blur, but alas, there is no motion. I'm going to use this frame because it's the most obvious. Let's go and blow it up the rest of the way. Okay. So you're like, wow, that's weird. There's motion blur, but no motion. What do we do? And it's called shake. No, it's called camera shake deblur. There we go. Camera shake deblur. Camera shake deblur. It takes the frames around it and it uses that to figure out what in focus should be. And boom, we just, with out of the box, it goes from that to that. I usually, for a shot like this, as much as was in that first shot, I usually go to 9 frames just because it's a little better, and because I like to do overkill. But you know, it just gets rid of the weird motion blur where there should be no motion blur. If we play that back, it might take a few minutes. It might take a little bit longer. Yeah, it's not going to be playing super nice with me right now, but it suffice to say that it gets rid of those motion blur, just a little hits of motion blur in there that kind of give it away. Because again, your viewer might not necessarily notice that something's off, but they're like, why does it get randomly blurry in there? You know, it's just those subtle things that help sell the shot a little bit more. And so yeah, that's
camera shake deblur, like, is that a native thing to After Effects, or is that something is that an added third-party plugin?
That's native to After Effects. That's been in there for a while. And you also do have, I couldn't get any of the shots to really give me a good rolling shutter, but you do have rolling shutter repair in After Effects as well. And that will take care of some of the pieces that some of that, but it only really works on shots that are going left to right. Oh, I will say also, camera shake deblur also works if the blur, the motion blur, is from your camera's stabilization. So anything that's stabilized, it won't really get rid of anything if it's not been stabilized, as be stabilized either by you in After Effects or Premiere or in your camera. So if your camera, if the stabilization there does it, and you get a weird kind of motion blur thing, camera shake deblur also. Rolling shutter repair, like I said, I played with some of the shots that Eric gave me, and I couldn't get one that really did a whole lot of it, but you can, not enough to really warrant showing, but there is a rolling shutter repair within After Effects as well that works great. And it's kind of the same as camera shake deblur, where you just kind of drop it on and like crank it and it works. You know, it does. So it's really effective on that. Yeah, and then like I said, just hopping into, if you could always go back in if you're like, that's not quite right, you can go back into Mocha. You can go back into Mocha. And go back, there we go. And you could always go back in and redefine the area, retrack it. So if you're like, all right, maybe that was too big of an area, maybe there was something back here that was throwing it off, you can always shrink the area. You can toss layer, you can retrack it. It's always, and so it's very non-destructive in that way. So yeah, that's the way they kind of do it with Mocha. Any questions on Mocha? Then you're not paying attention. Mocha's deep. There's got to be questions on Mocha. There's always questions on Mocha. I have questions on Mocha.
I got a question, DJ. So you were talking about layers earlier. Is it taking, as it's analyzing, is it taking the layer and creating, or is it taking the clip and creating layers of that clip? Because you talked about the hand coming in and you could turn that layer off.
Yeah, no. So in Mocha, your layer in actually the actual Mocha program, like once you're actually in the Mocha app, like a layer is just defining a region to watch.
Okay.
So it is. So now, if I were to make a square in here, since that square would be an enclave of this bigger search area, it would still search that search area. We'd be okay with that. But yeah, like you're just defining, like each layer is creating a set of data that is representing an area in space.
Okay.
So yeah. And that's the reason like Mocha can be really hard to get your head around. Like I was using it back when we were having Mary Poplin come, I was using it, and it took her like 2 visits before it really clicked for me. And I had been using it the whole time. Like I was using it in between her visits, but finally, like she said it, and she said it the first time I remember even, but it just didn't click. That like more than anything else, what you're doing in Mocha is you're getting raw data that you can apply to things, which makes it very unlike Premiere and very unlike After Effects, because in those you're creating the look, you're actively making it appear, something that looks like something. So even if we were, let's say that we were tracking this, and I'm not going to go into planar tracking too much because we've done it and that's not what this is about. But if we were doing this, when people set up their planar track, like they're like, oh, this is my surface, cool. So when I get this is what my surface is going to do. Not really. Like, because we see it, it looks like it's now aligned to this area, this kind of where the fair is, and it's this little cutout, but it's not aligned to Mocha. It's not aligned to anything. It is a set of data that is inside of and in relation to this tracked set of data that we have. So it's really abstract, and like even now when I'm working on a hard shot, like you go through the other side and you're like, I don't know what I'm thinking about anymore. There's nothing tangible. There's nothing like, so when you get a bad track, like a lot of time, like if I get a bad track when I'm doing a planar track, I'll just blow everything out and start over, because you're looking at a surface, your brain automatically wants to think that it's within that space, but you might be dealing with, when you get a bad track, you might be dealing with an entirely different scale and universe of space than what you're actually looking at. And that's hard to get your head around. And like I said, I've done it on big projects, and it's hard to get your head around. Like it never stops being hard because it's so contrary. But for this kind of stuff, for stabilization, it's easy as pie, and it's super, and you don't have to think about that kind of stuff. Like it doesn't get to that level. You literally, you define an area, you track it, it gives you that data, boom. So and it's also good to kind of as an entry into Mocha, because then all of a sudden you have that. One thing that I will talk about that I actually wasn't going to, but
before you leave Mocha, how do you remember Mocha? In my case, I remember I learned it. It really worked on a project. And the next time I needed to use it, I'd totally forgotten every little thing I learned. You just have to keep using it all the time? Or is there some way like you make a test case you can use as your own example to fall back on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, I don't know. I never ran into that. Like I got it. I used it a lot. Like when I first started using it, I don't remember necessarily trying to find ways to use it, but I just had a lot. But like I said, I mean, I think that the actual software side of things, the UX, the UI side of things, not hard with Mocha. Like it might not be as attractive as some of the other pieces, as After Effects or as Premiere, but it's not hard to learn to use. It's really and I still have, and it's really that figuring out that you're talking about space and depth in a way that like you just don't think about it necessarily. And it's one of those things, like if you try to figure that out, then you're going to sound like a college freshman who like just tried weed for the first time. But if you just accept that like it's not going to make a whole lot of sense and just throw out the data, I didn't get it right, I'm just going to try again, it'll align. Like, it's not hard to get it to track right. It's just trying to fix a bad track is a lot harder than just kind of redoing it, because it's a quick program. I mean, you literally, even if you're doing a hard track, like you define an area, you track it, you set the surface, you export the data, boom. It does what it does well. And it's just don't try to fix it, because it's
Well, I
hard.
know, I agree that it does what
Yeah.
it does well. It's just that I learned where the pieces are to command it and do that. And oh yeah, that's how I want to do that. And then 6 months later, when I want to use it again, how did I do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess just hang with it a little bit more. But yeah, something I was going to talk about, which doesn't completely fall into this, but since I did kind of go into like the basics of tracking with the warp stabilizer, and this is like its cousin, because look, it even has the cool blue line that comes across. It says it's analyzing. So this is the 3D camera tracker. So remember how I said that like if you needed to put a little thing that said like call box, and an arrow pointing to it, you could do it that way. And that is true. You could do it that way. That is a possibility. But you also saw me try to move it around. It's not super powerful. So I'm going to run so you can run the 3D camera tracker. This also comes in After Effects. I think everything I'm showing tonight is stock After Effects, because that's just how we roll tonight. So we're going 20% on this, but it does take a little bit longer to.
It's probably because that whole clip, it like goes inside the building and things like that. So
well, I trimmed it so it would be shorter, but I still
Okay.
trimmed it to like 20 seconds for some reason, because I was feeling squirrely. I don't know why I did, but yeah, the first time I did it, it totally locked my system down, because you like walk around Gaslamp, you give us a tour, you're like, this is where Tony Hawk did his thing a couple months ago. So yeah,
that was awesome, by the way.
yeah, it was. I actually drove by his house the other day. I found it, and it was I just happened to find it kind of unexpectedly. I remember on Twitter one time, this is me completely burning time while this does this, but I saw that he was giving away his son was giving a skateboard at Hawks View Park, which kind of stood out for obvious reasons, because it's Tony Hawk View. And he said it's 5 minutes from my house, and I looked up where Hawksview was. It's not far from me over here, because I live up in North County. So I went by, I saw it. Very cool.
Was he there giving it out?
Oh no, this was after the giveaway. I just was I just saw that it was like, whoa, he lives actually in my old neighborhood. I might be exaggerating with quite how much of that was my neighborhood, but we're just gonna go with it.
There's a great documentary about him on HBO, by the way.
Oh yeah, it's one of those people that I've always kind of been worried to find too much about, because every time you find out something about someone, you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. So
He seems like a generally nice guy, so I would watch the documentary.
all right, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. All right, so now we're finished. It's solving for the camera. So you're going to see coming up, you're going to see those track points that we had again. See those track points. Render track points right there. Render track points. There we go. Yeah, so it's these track points again. I'll make them bigger just so that they read across. But what you can do with this is, like, if you were to do a planar track in Mocha, you would want to set this entire, you'd have to frame this out, and it would be a little hard because you can see through it. This was actually an issue that I ran into when I was doing a film for a friend of the group, Brandon Plants. I was trying to track a fence with some zombies behind it, and they were moving, the background was moving, the fence was moving, and I had a lot of pieces. So I kind of did it with a combination of Mocha and this. But what you can see is when you start highlighting points, you can actually see the plane that it is attaching to, which is super helpful on a screen. I mean, I know it's not a screen door, but like on a door like this. So you can see that, what's defining the surface. And it's kind of giving you that thing. So you can select a group of points and find out, oh, look, there's that, So then you can create a camera that works in conjunction with that. So then you'd be able to, if Eric wanted to put his logo on this door so that it opens when it happens, you could do that, because now we've clearly defined this. You'd create a camera, you put the logo here, boom, it opens. 3D camera tracker, it's awesome. Just to kind of get into a little bit more, like you wouldn't like in this, I put it's a fixed angle of view. I'd probably put that it's a variable zoom just because we're moving. There's a lot of camera movement to it. But I'd try both. It's, you know, a lot of the stuff like 3D camera tracker, like the warp stabilizer a little bit, but like 3D camera tracker and like the content aware fill in After Effects, just try all the stuff. Like they, you know, these little drop downs like this, they do mean something. But just because they mean something doesn't mean that it always is true, you know. And sometimes you're just going to get a better look with it. But yeah, so that's just the quick dive into the 3D camera tracker. And the reason I'm not creating the camera is because I will definitely crash zoom if I do. So if I start trying to take that any further, it will 1000% crash in. So the other thing I want to show you how to do is using this shot, Lucky's lunch counter.
One of my favorite places to eat downtown, by the way.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you. Sponsor of the group. So, so we want to stabilize it. So there is this thing you might have heard about, that there is a stabilizer that it's just called the tracker in the stabilizer in the tracker in After Effects. I don't necessarily recommend you use it. It works in a pinch. I would probably go with either of the two ways first. But if for whatever reason those just aren't doing it for you, you can try it. If those aren't working, I've never seen a situation where this would be the thing, but let's check it out. So up here you go to Windows and it's tracker. So it'll pull up this little window right here. It'll probably be over here, but I put it here so it'd be behind my webcam because I like to make things difficult. And this is where you can track camera, track motion, and you can also fire off the warp stabilizer from here. For this, we're just going to hit stabilize motion. All right, so what it does is it's going to bring up 1 point. You are not going to stabilize your motion with 1 point, because what you need to do is you're also going to need to rotate it. If it's flat for some reason, if you're sliding the camera around on an air hockey table, then maybe you can do it. I always do rotation. As much as I recommend to not use this way, I definitely recommend not to use scale just because it never looks good. So what you're going to do is you're going to define the search area. The inner box is the closed search area. The outer box is your region of confidence. So the bigger these two boxes, the more processing power it's going to take. We're going to keep them small because this is such a long clip. We just need to stabilize a little part of it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pick out 2 spots, and it gives you a little blow up. And we're going to pick out 2 spots that should be trackable, that are somewhat distinct. I always like to pick corners of things. Or just something that's, corners are typically the best. Eyes are pretty good, but if you're tracking faces with this, I feel like you probably already lost. That's how much confidence I have in this. But like we'll get something pretty good with this. I already ran it once and it's pretty good. But any kind of corners, any edges are typically pretty good. But it needs that variation. The reason I like corners is because everything to one side, everything to like one area is blue here, and everything to the other is white. So it knows exactly where that pixel stays, because you're not just trying to keep, like the corner of the L, you're trying to keep one specific pixel, and that's going to give you the best result. So, all right. So, and the reason that you have 2 points is because we're also tracking rotation, because that's going to help it stay flat. Like I said, really, I wouldn't do scale. So we're going to check that. We're going to look our source. It's our file, get the track. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to hit analyze forward from here, because we're on the first frame, and it's going to do this. And this does it. It's the fast. I will say it's usually faster than Mocha. And for a simple shot like this, it's pretty good. You're going to see the thing I don't like about it pretty readily. And I've tried some things, and there's a couple things I can tell you to do. They're like, if this is the only thing that works, then do it. But again, it's kind of at your own risk. So, all right, we just did this entire 12-second clip, and it breaks up at the end there because it does get bigger. If we really needed it to do that, all we need to do is make these boxes bigger, because at some point here, it moved so much between one frame that it couldn't look in that box anymore. Like it was not finding what it needed. So then it just kind of loses it. And so, but okay, so we've got the trap data now. We see all the little points, and all we're going to do is hit apply. We're going to apply to dimensions X and Y because we're doing that And we created even more keyframes. It's insane how many keyframes we've created. But we should close all that out just to keep it clean. And we've come into the situation where it's actually pretty stable. We got to do that thing again that we did before, where we Control Alt Y, which is create a null. We parent the null to the, we parent the video to the null. That way we can scale it up. And other than a little jolt at the beginning, and that usually happens, it's pretty locked down. But you'll notice it's got that wiggle, which is fine. They're all going to have the wiggle. If you didn't want the wiggle, you would have brought a tripod. But there's the wiggle, but it's more mechanical. It's just a little harsher. It's not as smooth. And the reason for that is all these keyframes. Like, let's just look at something real. And since this is a 12-second shot, we're not going to have a 12-second establishing shot on Lucky's, no matter how much they want us to. So I don't care that this is doing this here. Like I said, if we wanted to keep it from doing it, we'd just expand those boxes, but we'd also still be waiting for that to happen. So what we want to look at is, why is it so like that? So we look at our track data, and let's just hop into the graph editor here. That's why. Like, if you look, if we wanted that motion to be smooth, then these curves should be smooth, but they're jittery. And the reason for it is, in that weird way, After Effects probably has the best tracker, has the best tracking data gathering system, because it's so precise. But in that precision, there's nothing to round it off. They didn't do anything to finish it. So it's like, it's coming out just pure black and white. You know, it's not, there's nothing to kind of soften it to make it feel like anything. So you're getting a very, very harsh track. The move, the wiggle, instead of being that kind of jello move, is more like, it's more like a, you know, basket of bread, like loaf bread moving around, just kind of a, and that's the reason I say that I don't know that I can use it, because you can get by with a wiggle. You can get by with a jello wiggle, particularly if you start running those jello wiggles through the rolling shutter thing in After Effects. You can start to soften that up. It's going to start to, you can get by. People might not always notice it, but you give it this, but this gives it kind of a tense energy. And that's the reason that I say, like, just use it sparingly. Sometimes it's, I mean, I've used it within the last year, and it worked out great. But it is the last one I go to, because it's, you know, and like I said, if you have to do it, what I would do is say, and go into this graph editor and start looking at things, and you can start seeing trends like through here. And so maybe we get rid of all the keyframes between here and here. So we get rid of the 3 of the keyframes, and you just kind of get the peaks and valleys, not the big peaks. You know, don't get rid of a bunch. You know, you don't want to get rid of all but like here and down here, but get rid of like every, you know, keep every 3rd keyframe, something like that, and then see if you can play with that curve. It probably won't work, but I have been able to smooth out that jitter sometimes a little bit. The problem is sometimes it starts to feel floaty, so it's a balancing act with it. But yeah, that's the thing, is like, just kind of get rid of some of this excess data, because like, it does not, like, this shot for me is still, you know, I do not need to change as minutely if I'm also going from here to here. You know, the change from here to here is bigger than the single intra frame movements. So yeah, you can start to play with, you know, every 3rd frame, something like that, and that'll help soften it up. And that is the tracker.
I don't know how many. I think I've only used the tracker in After Effects like a couple times, and I've never had good results with it.
It's hard. I mean, it's easy to ase. It's hard to get reliably good stuff out of it. Like I said, really the best way to do it is, to me, is if you're stabilizing, would be Warp Stabilizer, because it's easy and you can go get coffee while it's doing it. But like, the best bang for your buck is going to be almost always running it through Mocha. Mocha's fantastic. It can be weird because it's so still. You know, I think Warp Stabilizer keeps it feeling a little organic, but if you need a shot that looks like a tripod, I think that you still get the rolling shot. You still get a little wobble, but you get less wobble with Mocha than you get with anything else.
All right, folks. Well, with that, on that note, we will sign up, and we will actually have a September meeting that will be in September and not mislabeled September. So So we will see you all then, and hopefully we will have it on the actual third Wednesday of the month as opposed to pushing it to the fourth Wednesday. But at the rate things are going, I wouldn't be surprised if we have to move the meeting. So thank you everybody for coming out. We will see you next month, and have a good one.